Hey honey, I was wondering where the cake was that I brought here. I hope you haven't ate it. Honey? Oh yeah. What? I am getting the therapist. I'm getting the therapist, honey. Hello everyone, your only Max Danger here, back with a review. And judging by the intro and everything, you just have an idea with this movie. And being one of those films that technically flopped in the box office in the first week because no one had no clue about it, and some questionable things the film had during the scenes of each thing. But other than that, this is my review of Keeper. Start off with probably like only positive before I get into when I destroy this film is probably just the camera work and like certain parts of Keeper where, like, don't get me wrong, there were certain parts that were watchable, but that's one. And then there's the other, probably the only left was, again, the camera work. But other than that, it had no kind of build up to anything in the end. It became very weird. And then let's get into the main part of this review. To start off, this film was probably one of the worst horror movies I've seen in a long time, and I rewatched it the other week. And is it still as bad as it was when it came out? I still stand what I say from the out of cinema reaction from it. If you remember that video, I said a few things that I pointed out, and then there's a few other things I didn't want to go into detail until I made a review. And so with Keeper, as a movie of going to a large type of movie, like, you'd expect it to be like this mediocre type of movie where it's like you root for whoever or anything, but the very first trailer or the teaser that came out when it got announced looked way different compared to when it came out, because the teaser was kind of like, in a way, making it out to be something of a different story point of it. But then when you go and see it back around the year when it came out, it was questionable. It was a very hard watch. It was one of those films where, like, it had no purpose. It had nothing going for it. And what I mean by not going for it, and like the way I'm phrasing, was because the film didn't have a structure with its scenes. Like, it was so out of place. It was so much in terms of probably what the writers of the film or whatever the characters were the people who were acting, like, nothing bad about the actors here. I bet they tried their best for the film, but it was just probably the type of script they were given and what kind of story they were doing with it. But the film turned out in ways where scene to scene would play out, but it didn't make sense. So, like, the very first part of the film, which heavily spoilers, so spoiler warning, be warned. But if you want to see it for yourselves, then see it for yourselves. It'll probably be on the Fire Stick or be on an off-brand thing by now, because it came out, I think, a year or two ago, so at this point. But with the film itself, of the beginning, it literally just straight up shows you three women from some kind of different generation, and with the generation of these women from whatever times, you think like, am I seeing a completely different movie? Have I gone to the wrong screen? Because that's what I generally thought when the film started. Like, it wasn't normal. It had one woman at a door, and then there was one, I think if I remember, at a bar scene, and then a different one. I forgot what the other one was, but there were three. Then from there, it cuts to modern day, where it kind of just like gets brushed aside until later. But the thing is that it doesn't explain anything about what these women are in the film, and it kind of had no purpose. It didn't make sense. It still doesn't till this day after rewatching it, because it was such a random movie to go for the beginning. And then once the beginning part, we established getting to know the actual main actress, the main character of the film, and she is trying to get on with her new boyfriend or slash husband. That they end up going to this cabin, and this is where the film goes in a bizarre turn, and not in the ways where you would think it would go the length of it, probably acting wise, because there was watchable. Like, there's a scene where there's, if I remember, a neighbor, like, or a relative of the boyfriend type of thing, and when it came to the bit, which I don't think anyone has even noticed it, and I'm surprised no one hasn't even made a meme on TikTok or anything, and I established that literally in my intro, and that being the chocolate cake scene in the film. And this is where I thought, what on earth am I watching? Like, this was just one of those films I'm gonna censor this, like, what the type of film am I watching type of scenario, because it was just out of place. It was such a random scene. It didn't have anything going for it. It had nowhere, in no direction at all. Like, there was no plot point about the cake. Like, all there was once was just a scene of the boyfriend saying, "Don't eat the cake." And that was it. Bobs usually does in the night. Goes downstairs, eats it. But, oh my God, like, and I'm not exaggerating here, but the scream I had, like, because it's supposed to be a tense scene, like, it's supposed to be like this weird, unnerving moment that the film's supposed to have, but the entire my screen was just laughing. And, like, I don't know what direction that was supposed to be. Clearly, it made people laugh. It didn't make people uncomfortable. It was just literally like fingers, like, oh, it was so out of place. It was such a random scene. It just went on and on and on. I believe it went on for a few good minutes. And it was so weird to the point where we're going after this scene. Like, what could possibly be worse than that? And after that, it takes a step down from that, and it goes back to the girlfriend boyfriend type of thing, where she thinks there's something going on with the boyfriend or this and that, and so there's a whole plot with her trying to figure out what's going on and all that. And then I think, if I remember, like, the boyfriend's best friend comes over and all that, and a lot of stuff happens with that. And then, like, just a bunch of random stuff, just scene after scene after scene after scene. But then it gets into the other half, like, probably near the act, where you see the creatures, and then you see more bizarre things, which should have been in the middle point of the film, but they only saved it for the end, which was weird. And that being, like, the bit where she ends up in the basement bit, and it was where the boyfriend closes the door and she's just having, I'm not going into detail for YouTube reasons, but there's just this entire scene of these creatures under the basement, but it ends up becoming something so out of the blue, so random. It gets so outlandish, ridiculous, to the point which I'm not gonna say for YouTube reasons, because in the moment of like being of seeing a creature in a horror movie, you would run, you would hesitate and try and get away from them. In this scenario of this film, I'm not going into detail at all here, but it just gets real weird. It gets bizarre, and it goes on and on and on. And I remembered like leaning back in the cinema seat and just looking around at what people's reactions are, and people are just laughing. Like, to be fair, there was like, what, a group of college people in the screening, so they were like having a whale of a time. They were laughing at the expense of the scene as well. But obviously the cake scene was probably worse, but this scene near the end, and I think people will probably see where I'm coming from by how ridiculous it is. And then it gets to the point from that, or maybe I might be out of place with seeing a scene here, but if I remember after that, I think it might be after that scene, she ends up escaping, but it's, oh my god. So like the bit of the scene where she climbs out of the window, falls into the water, you would expect it to be like she'll go to the police, or type of thing where, the film goes into a mediocre point. You would think she would do something, right? Nope, the way around. She ends up going into a weird thing where instead of going to the police or anything, the boyfriend believes she's gone, thinks she's, and goes into the room with files or whatever it is, and you look at what he's looking at, and you think, and obviously it's what you see at the beginning with the three previous women at the beginning, which made no sense, get brought up again, but just in the most weird way, where you're thinking to believe those were his previous wives or girlfriends, which might have been the case, I don't know, but again, that just goes into another weird scene what he does, and then it gets cut straight into this weird, much worse, like the film just kept getting weird at the end. Like, it went from creatures in the basement, which I'm not going into detail about, boyfriend believes she's gone and ends up like doing something with files, whatever it is, and then she escapes. No, not, and then she survives, and this is where the ending here. So he ends up from age or something, but before he does, she puts him upside down, and he puts him in this weird like jar of stuff, and it's so random. Like, the movie had a weird vibe during the halfway point, and then it just sank into an all low, where it just goes into like these random scenes. Like, from a storytelling perspective, the story, like, I couldn't even find anything interesting with the story. Like, it didn't even make sense. Nothing came together, nothing blended well, and the structure of the film just did not like serve its purpose. And so Keeper as of this review, it is the worst thing I have seen, and probably is one of those films I will bring up every now and then as like a joke, because it is one of those films which I think was a missed opportunity for people to bomb on the internet from, because I think people overlook certain films and say they're amazing. Keeper had some ratings and some reviews, and obviously that's just a matter of opinion, but Keeper was just one of those films that was so hard to watch that you just couldn't help but to laugh. Like, it didn't had any grander purpose. It didn't had a good story. The story is so basic. It just throws things in that don't make sense, which were not story beats, which were just... I think the film was doing something like shock factor. Like, it was trying to get a reaction out of you watching it without any story elements added into it. Like, it just had this weird thing the entire way. But yeah. And other than my rambling rant here of my review, like, other than that, at this point, like, this should just be more of a series as well. I should start adding of films I dislike the most. But yeah, Keeper, absolutely worst thing I've seen probably in years for a horror movie. I know it says a lot that I'm a big fan of horror movies, but Keeper was just one of those ones that was just like low expectations. Like, I literally went into it not knowing what it was going to be about. Like, it was around the time when I went to go and see it. Like, I just booked a random movie out of curiosity without looking at trailers or anything, went into it, and I remember just coming out of it being, well, that was a terrible film, which I didn't see it, but obviously here we are right now in this review. So yeah, but other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Be looking forward to probably a bunch of stuff coming out. There's going to be a good video coming out of a review, and then the long-awaited sequel to the Max Travels in the middle of March, which I am looking forward to sharing with you when the time comes, because it's going to be a longer video. It's going to be much bolder. It's going to be way out of my depth, because this time for 2 days, it's going to be 7 days. And with that, I will see you in the next video. Danger out.